Good evening and welcome to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. I'm your host, Miss V, or as Dan Nedrelo says, Vic. And tonight my special guest is Dan Nedrelo. He is a little expert on a little bit of everything. He's a vertebrae zoologist, a photographer, I had a whole list of things, Dan.
I'll just say wildlife biologist, biological illustrator. I'm interested in animals, all of them, anything that sucks air.
So Dan, you've been around a while, haven't you?
I'm an old guy,
yeah. So what got you first started in your journey on the Bigfoot quest?
5th grade, Mrs. Weber's class. She uttered the word abominable snowman, and I was hooked. I went to the encyclopedias. I got the Tibet Himalayan deal with the Yeti, and then the 67 Patterson film came out, and that was an article in the newspaper. I was shocked, elated. There were books on the subject of hairy things that walked bipedally, and I started my studies in primates, which I was all excited about because of Samson, our giant male lowland gorilla at the Milwaukee Zoo, who always was laying on the shelf with his back turned to us, so we never got to see him move. I didn't get to see gorillas move until I got to Henry Dorley Zoo to see some amazing footwork and behavior with them. So always excited about the big primates.
And that's what started your journey. What actually got you into the Bigfoot world?
The mysterious idea that there's something this big, reported by adults who took it serious, although I didn't know any, that repeatedly described similar behaviors, similar physiques, similar habitats, and it made sense biologically to me. The more I read, the more I needed to read more. And it was in the back of my mind through my journey as a photographer and a wildlife biologist and a herpetologist as I covered many states in the United States and eventually out of the country.
Do you find it amazing that people that have never met each other, especially before, we had the technology that we had and they were sharing the similar stories?
Exactly. Pre-internet descriptions of these big fellows were pretty shockingly amazing to me, and also the descriptions that I got of the footprints and the trails they took, the descriptions of them going into difficult areas that most people would have extreme problems transiting up and down hills and cliffs and bluffs and stream bottoms and jumping ravines. So there was great power, very ape-like tendencies in what appeared to be a bipedal creature that continued to be described as monkey-like, man-like, and very, very ape-like in the early descriptions that has become very man-like now off the internet. So my focus is on the witnesses who have personal experiences that often don't share much because they're not looking for personal gain. They're looking for information. And as I accumulate this, I like to try to help as many people as I can and stay away from all the disputes and the silliness that people waste their time with online.
And the drama. So, when we spoke earlier, I asked you what the pros and the cons were in the Bigfoot world. And one of the things we talked about how difficult it can be for witnesses to come forward, especially with, the drama in the Bigfoot world and just, it seems like they just get hammered from non-believers and then they get hammered from believers. What has been your experience with that?
Oh, all of it. And it's very difficult to talk to people in many cases because they're going to be withdrawn. They're not interested in going out and adventuring to see how you're going to treat them. And so most of our work is behind the scenes, away from the general public and all the enthusiasts that get real bent out of shape and excited if they run into things that are new to them. I'm working on my picture here. It's the first thing that got me going also was I had an experience in 7th grade. It was a hissing from something very large hiding behind vegetation. I spent a lot of time wondering what that was, and I was in my 40s before I got similar vocals with visuals out of friends from Michigan who have a recording project there that's going long term. And they're obviously Sasquatches, and that's what made the sound, but I didn't know that at the time. And today people would say, well, you didn't see it. Well, it's true, but the vocalizations match. Now we have sonograms and things of technical natures to further explore this. And as our technology grows, so will our baseline knowledge. It wasn't too long ago the wood knocks weren't even accepted as possibilities, and many people still don't accept that. Well, something's wood knocking. Something leaves tracks. Something has characteristics of the way they take out carcasses and prey species, something apparently very omnivorous that leaves tracks that has associated other secondary evidence that goes with it, whether hair or whatever. But we still have a DNA controversy, so there's a lot of things that need to be resolved. And the politics in this is just insane. So a lot of time is wasted over the same repetitive problems.
So when you first started your journey, and you've had a lot of experiences, you've met a lot of people. When you first started your journey, Dan, what has changed the more you gather knowledge and the more you gather data? What, from the time you started to now, what has changed? Have you had an opinion about the creature, the being, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and I call it Bigfoot. Some people call it Sasquatch. What has changed from when you first started to now, your opinion, or what have you learned that just kind of blows you out the water?
The proliferation of witnesses coming forward. That's a big deal. This could be attributed to public relations on television in controversial shows that irritate a lot of people, such as Finding Bigfoot, which is actually a wonderful medium for bringing people forth, because now they have a place where they can go and, they know that there are people who take this serious, and I am one who takes it very serious. In 2000, my mother passed away. My sister made a bet, and that was, one, I bet you don't become computer literate. I struggled with that. I finally did, somewhat at least. And also she bet that I wouldn't take the time to network with other researchers publicly. Well, I try not to do that so much publicly, but although I have my moments of that, most of the work is behind the scenes, but my network base has grown and proliferated like crazy. So there isn't any state in the country that I don't have some contacts in. And that's wonderful, because all our contacts vary, whether enthusiasts or whether witnesses or whether landowners with suspect activity. We don't have a body on the table. So there's going to be a significant number of people that are waiting for that incredible evidence to match the incredible claims that goes with the gamut of this target species complex we call hairy men, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Omaha, and all the Native Americans that have previously described it in virtually every state and throughout Canada and Mexico and down into South America. And then we have the Asian variations and the European variations and even Australia. But the strange thing is, no body. So that means it can't possibly be real. But yet the secondary evidence, the biologist and the technology behind that is real. But not for everybody, especially non-biologists. So something makes the kills. Something leaves the handprints. Something leaves the footprint. Something has a repetitive gait that is a compliant gait where the hips allow the legs and the feet to move in ways that people don't. And then we have the size factor, the power factor, and then the vocalization descriptions. And it just gets more and more amazing. I've had things happen, especially recently since 2018, that I can't explain. So it is a great mystery.
What do you think about the people that think we should have a body on a table to prove they exist?
Well, that's a complicated thing too, simply because there's conservation concerns regarding to the well-being of them, particularly if they're a primitive type people, as many feel, and they may well, they certainly are, if they exist, which they do. There are incredible things going on with their abilities to survive and evade us, especially with our technology and our game, everything from our game cams to drones to all these things. I work with some fellows that are amazing at what they do. Shane Carpenter's a tracker. He has shown me some wonderful things, as has Randy Harrington. Our computer specialist, Gary Schutte, also is working and coordinating with everyone. We've got footprints from 4 individuals now on the private property in Missouri, and we're watching them grow up and paying attention to their sizes over time. And Shane is in the process right now, as we speak, of documenting these footprints and checking the measurements and things of that nature. And I'll be working with him in December or January, rather this winter sometime, on some of the evidence that's been collected. So I know for a fact that this is real and very amazing.
You were telling me that your first 2 encounters happened in Missouri.
That is correct. That is great. It was very comical too, and almost an unbelievable situation, because I had been working at a university in the afternoon, and I put the animals away, and I drove down in the afternoon. It took me quite a long time to reach the southern portion of Missouri, where the location is. And interestingly enough, I got out there about 2:30 in the morning, and by 3 o'clock in the morning, we had a sighting. About a half an hour after I got there, and it was simply through a game cam thermal. A thermal rather, not a game cam. And I haven't had a lot of sleep today. Then perhaps it was 100 feet out. I'd have to check specifically, but anyway, we thought we had a hit, and you could see it. And Shane Carpenter ended up walking in on it and being described exactly where it was. He came within 7 to 8 feet of it, and it was a youngster that was leaving approximately 10 and a half inch tracks and about 5 feet in height. And it had a kind of a silver gold reflection as he shined a flashlight into it, and he had quite a look at it for quite some time. And eventually we had some teeth chattering, and a rock was thrown by another individual. Interestingly enough, they came in last night, that night after being verified by local audio, and the night after as well. So these fellows are taking notes on their experiences, and after a half a decade of doing this, there's quite a bit to cover. And it's repeated behaviors and matches that of other behaviors described by other people. So that's pretty amazing. And I'm also with a number of other groups that allow me to work with them as well across the country. I spent a little bit of time out in Washington, Idaho this last year, and the network with those folks is just amazing. We've got a group called Legacy Discoveries, and they have things that are off the charts going on with them. And, that's run by Angelique Benham and her son, Mitch. And I think that there are many people in many situations all over the country that it's almost like you don't even share some of the things that they claim that are happening, because it doesn't make sense to most people. And, what's real and what's Memorex? Those are some of the things that'll need to be sorted out. We're after the truth. We'd like to find out exactly what's going on. And, we've got a fraction of it. a long way to go. And again, as far as the body goes, perhaps an individual that is found that passed away, or possibly hit by a vehicle or something like that, rather than sacrificing an individual. But, this is a money trip for a lot of people. So, you are well aware of all the complex aspects of this, I'm sure.
I am, and I'm going to say straightforward. I don't agree that anything should die just to prove it exists. There's different ways you can study, but now we are only human, and we don't have the answers, and they are very, very, we're in their habitat. And I tell people, we discover animals every day that we thought were extinct. And, I don't know how I feel about them. I do think there's a human aspect to them. I don't have anything to prove it or anything that really backs that up other than my experiences. And I remember we've been friends about 5 years, and I remember when I had an experience, and I mean, you were one of the first people in the community that just, really stepped up and helped me try to understand what happened. And I think one of the first things you told me, it was going to be okay, and it was okay to talk about it. And there will always be people out there that don't believe you. And, you never used the word, I don't think I ever heard you use the word hate, but there'll be haters out there, so to speak. And you really are one of the reasons why I stuck it out, and I still go out in the woods, and I still go out in the field. And but you just have a vast, you're like an encyclopedia of the Bigfoot world. And you've always been kind to people, and you don't get involved in the drama. And I think some of the thing is the drama is what just keeps people from connecting the dots. And I think if people would understand that people are not always going to view things the way you are, they have different opinions. But it seems like we in the Bigfoot world, it turns into an argument and conflict, and throwing each other under the bus. If we really got our stuff together, there's no telling what we could accomplish with research and studies. You have an opinion on that?
Couldn't agree with you more. Exactly. You hit it on the head.
So you had 2 experiences. Would you like to tell us about your second one?
Yeah, it was basically the next day, I believe. We got a chance to see one of them along a hillside, and he was on all fours, kind of doing a crawl. And it was a slow, gentle crawl. And it wasn't a great view, but it was a view. And we've got the tracks to verify presence. And plus the other fellas have had other visuals to go with them. One of the funnest things that happened was going through the audio of one of the nights there in 2019. Basically, we had all this equipment on these tables, and you could hear them go through all the equipment. And that was fun. Once they got to the medical bag, they zipped and unzipped it about 17 times. And then
Wow.
you could hear the cooler being closed. And appropriately, they took 6 monster cappuccinos,
6 months.
which is kind of fun. So,
well, we have an area we go out in Uwari, and that exact thing happens to my husband. You can literally hear something going around in the back of the truck. It's almost like it's exploring.
sure, exactly.
And it's like a curiosity. And I wonder if we're like live TV for them. I was telling Gwen Purcell, just a beautiful, beautiful lady from Pennsylvania. She has them in her backyard. I said, Gwen, you're like live TV for them, and because she goes out, she has some really incredible experiences. But getting back to you, what is the most amazing story that has been shared to you that you can share? And you know the people don't. What has been one of the most amazing stories that have been shared with you that people would just not believe?
There are a number of them. I wasn't there, so I certainly can't verify or prove it. But I have. This is a very difficult question because there's so many interesting things. I'll just give you one from me first, and that was in 2018. I ended up having to have skin graft surgery. I'm working on my phone here, trying to. Okay, this will. Okay, there we go.
For people that don't know it, it's Christmas Day.
I know. I'm playing with this angle thing. Okay. How about that?
And that's
there we
perfect.
go.
You were kind enough to give me a Christmas Day interview, and mostly because we've been friends for so long. And you're going to jump on tonight. We're going to try to go live, but you know, it's the Not So Perfect Bigfoot show for a reason, because I'm learning as I go. But we're going to try to go live with a couple of other people. And Dan, you were kind enough to jump up. But the reason we're doing the show is for the people out there that, you know, they don't have someone with them on Christmas.
Right. And exactly.
So this is going to actually air after that. So I just totally don't know why I just said that, but I just want to say thank you and Merry Christmas. So
well, thank you very much, and back at you. I'm going to jump in real quick, and I'll just give an overview of what happened to me. I had skin graft surgery. I was in the hospital unexpectedly for 17 days. Got out, okay, mobile, everything's working good. I go back to a private property here in Wisconsin that I've been working with, and we get tracks there. We've had vocalizations there. I've had other people very well experienced with visuals and vocalizations, and they told me, yes, they do that here too. Congratulations, they're there. Over time, we had things like the duct pipes off the house picked up and taken and put underneath the clothesline, like up to 5 times in a year. Maybe bricks moved in different ways, little coins picked up and moved around. People would say, well, of course, that would be jays and crows and fox and squirrels. Okay, but they're not picking up and moving statues. They're not picking up and moving tables. They're not taking wire off the top of these leaf ducts and laying them gently down to the bottom of the house. They're not pulling the strips out, the weather strips out from around doors and windows. They're not picking up vases that are easily broken and gently putting them in bird baths or things like that. And one of the things that I found on the trading block was a burdock plant. The roots were ripped off, and this was right after I came back from the burn center. And I thought, what is the medical aspects of burdock? And the roots are a cancer inhibitor. Fortunately, apparently I didn't need that, so they were ripped off. And then the burdock itself was interesting in that was something you can use as topically on skin for abrasions or burns. And so there's medicinal qualities with that. And that was what was on the trading block for me. My first question was, how did they know if that was them? And I didn't tell anybody else. And the little old lady that I was working with was in her later 70s. And so as a result, it wasn't her. She was as curious as me. She didn't really believe in the target species for years, and she had lived there alone with them for 35 years total by the time she passed this last year. And she never got a visual. She got all kinds of vocalizations. We got tracks. Was it all faked? Many people would say so. I don't believe that at all, and especially with the compliant gaits of the tracks that they weren't rabbit in 20 inches of snow plus going directly to the stream. Rabbits had nothing to do with, you'd have to have trespassers that knew Sasquatch behavior in order to replicate some of the things that we were experiencing. But what was also interesting was the fact that nobody knew we were working with that because we didn't tell anybody. and we kept it that way because your credibility is such a concern with people when you mention this subject, because you have to be nuts in order to believe this, according to most. But we, of course, know otherwise because of our experiences.
Well, that experience opens up a new door. You had the insight to take it a step further, not just to see an herb laying out in the open, but you took it a step further and investigated what the municipal purposes were for that herb. And that's something a lot of us don't do.
There's a lot of things a lot of us don't do, and we should. For example, we had over 100 100 footprints punched in the ground at the private property that is called the 400, the study area. And interestingly enough, about 35 of those were cast. And why do we think they're legit? Because we saw the footprint maker, Shane did, and we had one of the documentary photographers had saw it as it ran by as well. And there are 4 track makers right now on that property, a bigger male, 15 to 16 inch print minimum. And then we have a female, it's 14 inch. She has a youngster that's 6 inch, and now we have a 10.5 inch that we think was the 6 incher from 3 years ago during the COVID time, 2020 or so. At that time, we had 2 10 inches, a 12 inch, and a 15 inch male. So where did they all go, or did they grow up? That's what we're investigating now. Plus, there are other areas nearby with similar type sized tracks that suggest a similar type family group that are different than what we have on that property. And as we work with other researchers, we get more and more samples of similar. And whether it's Tennessee or Kentucky or the Carolinas or Florida, and working with Marie DeMont, or working with Angelique Benham and her group over in Idaho and Washington, or whether other people in Texas, or it's so similar in so many ways with all these research groups. And ideally, we are getting track casts, we are getting hair, we are getting vocalizations recorded, and we're getting some visuals, and we're getting a lot of anecdotal information, which most people just, anybody can say anything. But as Cliff Brackman likes to say, if congruent information supports something, you might want to look into it because you can learn from it. And we do indeed believe that's the case.
So you brought up COVID. Have you noticed anything different pre-COVID to post-COVID? I mean, because it seems to me they got a break from us, because we are constantly going out, and I'm not saying me, because I believe in leaving, the forest, the swamp. I'm swamp girl. That's where my areas are. My husband's born in the mountains. I believe in leaving it better than I found it. But I do know a lot of people that will just destroy an area, and we destroy their habitat, and we're constantly, people in general are constantly throwing their trash out. They just have no courtesy. So to me, when COVID hit, they got a break from us. But do you see any differences in the research, or just pre-COVID and post-COVID? Because we were away from them for a long time, and they had the parks, they just were able to live without a lot of intrusion.
I'm probably not the person to talk to about that, but it seems to me as though that would halt a lot of people that were concerned about them. So there would be a lot less interaction with them in some circles. How that figures into all the researchers across the country, I really don't know, because as you know, COVID itself was a very controversial subject and taken differently by so many people, and friendships were destroyed over it, et cetera, et cetera. Once we get into politics and religion and things like that, it seems to be, rather than uniting people, it separates us, and that makes us all weaker. So,
but the question I was going for was not a political stance. It was,
right.
we literally stayed out of their environment for a long time. Do you think they prospered with that, or do you think they didn't want us there? I mean, because we're very intrusive at times as people.
Well, I would think that they benefited from it, by us not being there. People are interesting because there's so many different philosophies. Some people have to have a weapon to enter the forest. Other people, not at all. Where I live, that's never been a concern. But I'm a wildlife photographer, so I want to get as close to wildlife as I can, where other people are very concerned about this, that, and the other. I spent 40 years chasing timber rattlesnakes up and down river bluffs. And interestingly enough, I never once had a Sasquatch situation come up. I would have loved to, certainly. Maybe not during the time where I'd have to change clothes, etc., because of the fear factor. But I never once had a rock thrown at me that I know of. I never once had ran into what I'd call a structure or a nest or anything like that. But I did run into, skunks and things like that. And I wonder how many cougars saw me. I wonder how many bears saw me, but I just never saw them. And that was interesting because most of these places where I was going was through the 70s and 80s and 90s and into the early 2000s. After about 2010 or so, I kind of stopped doing the river bluff work and spent more time cruising at night, trying to pick up audio and trying to do track, look for tracks and do a little more camping and that type of thing. I didn't get any activity until about 2010 locally. And 2008 is when it really kicked in for me. I ended up in Georgia working with a friend and got a chance to learn from her situation. And then I had done some things online and gotten down to Tennessee and Indianapolis, not Indianapolis, but Indiana, and had some experiences with local landowners that had activity. I did not get visuals, but I got audios. And I got situations where I had probably a chance to take a look, but the situation was uncomfortable. And at the time, I didn't have the cojones to get the view. And that's a shame, but I'm trying to change that now. So
with the wealth of information that you have at your fingertips, and just the people that you know and the just ongoing information, I mean, you're just like a intel hub. You have so many connections, you interview so many people, you've been so many places. What time of day or night, when do you get your most sightings? When does it seem like people have the most experiences?
Okay, different people would answer differently to that. So I think environmental situations play into each local situation. 2:00 in the morning seems to me to be like a highlight for them. Many people would say after midnight, and other people would say they're crepuscular, or they especially come out as soon as the sun goes down. Full moons play into that. Fog plays into that. I know when it's fog, I was told locally, if I want a daylight sighting, go during fog. And I was given a specific location with railroad tracks where I would have an increased likelihood of a sighting. And I will be focusing on that as I just learned of it in August. After dark seems to be when there's a higher percentage of activity, at least foraging. But it would vary because there are places where there simply aren't people. And there are plenty of reports by day. Hopefully that made sense.
It does. And the one thing you said that really hit home with me was about the fog. And, the area that I go out in, I was raised there. I'm so comfortable there. The one time that I have ever got a bad feeling is when I went to track the area in fog. And when I entered it, I got the worst feeling. And I followed my gut. And I turned around and went right back out, and it was during a very foggy, wet, damp morning. So I agree with that 100%.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Probably the most concerned I've been was during a situation. We were doing an on-property investigation in Tennessee, and it wasn't an aggressive group. It was just infamiliarity because it was 2002, and I had just been getting my feet wet with this. I hadn't gotten a lot of experience at that point in time, and we had branches break. It sounded like gunshot. We had an individual come down a dry creek bed, and we were watching a Doberman's behavior as it was watching, and you were listening to this individual. I had the opportunity. Sure, could I have walked over to the creek bed and tried to look in there to see it? Yes. Did I? No. I felt more comfortable at the time just seeing what was going to happen next, because you never know. It might be that it comes out of the creek bed and actually gives us a view and looks at us. Didn't happen. Was it really a Sasquatch? I didn't see it, so I can't say. Do I think it was? Given the circumstances of what was going on at that private property, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I kind of expect it to be. But again, sometimes we get faked out by a lot of things because nature, for all we know, it was a black bear. It was interesting on that property because a stream rock covered with moss that was heavy, say 40 pounds, was picked up out of the stream bottom, carried up a hill behind the house, and set in front of a cave. And the cave was interesting because it was open. Wasn't really a lot of places to hide in it, but it gave cool air. And the position of this rock offered two things. One, behind you, you'd have cool air coming out, which helps on a hot Tennessee day. And two, its position was you could sit on that rock and look down at the house and the private property and have a good view without anybody being able to look up and see you. So that's interesting.
Incredible. That is incredible. What do you think about the spider crawl? You hear a lot of people say they walk on their, or they get down on their knuckles and they spider crawl.
That's reported continuously, and I've had friends of mine who have claimed this visual. I didn't see it with them, but I trust them to be correct because I've known them for a long period of time, and it's repeated over and over. And I just know that this species is incredibly fast, and we've got a long way to go before we get a handle on exact speeds, but I know vertical running, there are plenty of reports talking about Sasquatches that can run vertically, bipedally, and keep up with vehicles going 40, 45 miles an hour. Some people claim more than that. Human beings vary in how fast we can run. Our fastest wide receivers go 30 miles an hour, perhaps in a 40-yard dash. We're close to that, 28 at least. So maybe it's not so far-fetched that these fellows can go 40 or more. As far as the spider crawl, I think we've seen human beings do amazing things, some of our athletes. Well, extend that to something with a different type of body, muscular system, nervous system perhaps, and different sensory systems. My goodness, why not? And especially when it's repeated by private individual sources over and over in many, many different parts of the country.
What do you think about their muscular system and their muscles? They're useful muscles. That's what I think. They're in North Carolina, a lot of people I spoke to, what they would experience is not the big patty types. They're slender, athletic. They have useful muscles. Do you find that their muscular system, what's the most amazing thing that you've really got out of that, and just your observations, your knowledge, your education, that people like me, the lay person, wouldn't catch?
That's a really well thought out question, and I only hope that I could come close to answering it reasonably. I think their speed and power stems from that muscle system, and many people continue to say, well, they're people, they're not apes. Well, they can still have ape-like characteristics and be people. Okay. They certainly act like people in many cases. Yet, I've got phenotypes described as gorilla, cavemen, normal people with hair, and other varieties as well. Some flat-faced, some not. Variations in the ears. There could be all kinds of recessive genetics involved here. We've got potential for throwbacks, interbreeding. We don't know. We could have different species hybridizing on the spot. We don't know. It's an amazing mystery. As far as the muscular system, I think the speed lends, if the strength is accelerated as the speed is, I think we would be shocked and amazed at what they can do with their bodies. I'll give you an example. A contact researcher of mine is in Colorado. He told me about 19-inch prints, 20-inch prints perhaps, standing still, leapt effortlessly 20 feet. That's pretty amazing considering the size of a 19-inch individual, which would put his height perhaps at almost 10 feet tall. Okay. And that's not acceptable to a lot of people. Many people say, no, they're 8 feet or less. Well, I don't know that for sure because I'm not out there with a yardstick measuring everybody. And some of the people that are making these claims are looking at their height next to a branch, which can be measured. And that's repeatedly done. And there are reports consistently over 10 feet in height. Some people accept a height of 12. Other people nonchalantly say 13, 14, 15. I don't know anything about that. All I can tell you is that we're going to be shocked when we learn the truth. And as far as the strength and power, Dr. Robert Alley, J. Robert Alley, now a friend of mine out of Alaska, has had some amazing experiences and with the witnesses he's worked with and the ability these animals, creatures, amazing primates, forest people, Sasquatch have in the ability to pick up heavy things, whether refrigerators, coolers. There's been other stories about them picking up different types of equipment and heaving them off hills and things like that. But no, there was a classic one before the internet of a fish barrel that was picked up and hoisted around. It had great weight. So I think some of these giant males have the ability to do incredible things with knocking trees down and picking up prey animals and pulling them up in trees, like perhaps 500 pounds or more. So I think that, you go through the literature and you go through the books, and I think we need to be paying attention to repeated claims over and over that come from private sources of people that are simply shocked by what they see. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, well, yes. So when you're taking, just look at the patty type, okay? The patty type. Yeah. Something that big can move that fast and fluent is incredible. And most people just can't grasp that could happen because, it's like bears. Bears can be pretty fast. They can, but most of the time they just kind of dope around and just got this way like they're just taking a Sunday walk in the meadow. But they can have some pretty fast aggression and speed. So when you're looking at something as big or a Bigfoot like the patty type, and they're that fluent and they're that fast, do you think, where does that come from? Because when I look at the patty film, I'm like, there is no, how do they go that fast? How do they move that fluent? Because you would think they would fall over themselves with that height and that weight and just the build, and that just amazes me. Do you have an opinion on that?
That's an area of study that I'd like to spend much more time with, the physiology potential and the anatomy and locomotion. That would be something Dr. Meldrum would certainly be able to express in high technical terms. My answer to that is that gorillas don't look particularly fast, but by golly, they really, really are. And pardon me for making the ape references, but it's not a human type strength or speed. It's something well beyond us. How much probably depends upon the individual, size, the age, and if they're like us, some are more athletic than others. Either because they're forced to be that way through the environment, or heavy-duty cool genetics, or a number of other factors that might play in. But the smoothness and the ability of having and showing great strength from the way they'll sit down, the way they're described to sit down to standing up, and the speed that they have in disappearing, plus the tactics that they use or are reported to use in, so fast that many people would say they disappear. And then that brings up many other questions. Do they have a capability through vibrations or sound effects or something else that could affect our optics? In other words, can they do something to obstruct our sight so that we can't see them, so it appears that they are or do disappear? You were asking me about unusual experiences I've had. I was with a friend last year, December 27th. It was 15 mile an hour winds. Pardon me as I mess with this camera again. 25 degrees, and we were over by Pine Stand, and we were getting wood knocks. So it seemed, and I'd earlier gotten vocalizations that sounded cattle-like, but we didn't have cattle in the area. So something was up. And there were other field signs that suggested there was activity. All of a sudden, we started smelling flowers. And I asked my friend Bryn, I said, Bryn, what do you smell? And she said, Dan, I smell the same thing you do. I smell flowers. And at about the same time, I had two, not one, two digital recorders fuzz out. In other words, they became non-functional. They were still crackling and sizzling, but they became non-functional. And that was approximately at the same time. In the meantime, she said she was touched or felt pushed. So that's interesting. I have no explanation for this whatsoever, except what other people tell me, which is variable. And some people tell me that they've communicated with them. And is that really going on? It doesn't seem like it. Do I think it is? Well, I think it's entirely possible. Here's why. Coco the gorilla could sign 1,000 English words and was capable of putting sentences together according to sources. Now, politics gets in there, and you get different opinions on that. Okay. Well, gorillas don't have the anatomical capability of speaking and saying all those English words. To Sasquatches, it is reported to be so. Yes, they seem to be able to repeat certain words that people have stated. For example, I have a friend, and we didn't see who the sound maker was, but I have a friend out in Uhori, North Carolina, and she will hear her husband say her name when he's not there. He has heard her say his name when he's not there. Do they have Sasquatches in the property? It appears so. Yes. Was that them? It's very well could be. And I have numerous other landowners that have reported the same thing. So, and my situation out in Idaho and Washington is we have individuals that hear voices. And I've talked to other private people who have said the same thing. And I'm not going to comment on this further because I really don't have much knowledge on it. I'll let those who do and have strong opinions speak on that. But I'll just say I think there's a lot more to this mystery than most people think. And the fact that we don't have a body doesn't make sense. All the extreme claims that we have don't make sense. But yet we have all these amazing witnesses all over that have had experiences with them and either had visuals or seen tracks or saw freshly killed deer or bear or fish were taken, or etc. I'll give you a local example. We had a local man not far from where I live say, I couldn't figure out why there was a giant man standing by my cow out in my field. And so I went out to confront him, realized how much bigger he was than the cow. I had my rifle with, and I shot it in the air, and he ran at high speed into the woods. Okay. He called the police. Nothing happened since. But it's like we have reports like one of my classmates in school saw a Sasquatch walk parallel with him, and he headed to the house, freaked out. I talked to his father years later to have him describe the situation. What he did was he went to the house, he grabbed his deer rifle, he loaded it, and he went into his room. And before he went into his room, his father confronted him, and he said, I'm going in my room, Dad, and I'm locking the door, and I'm not going to be out for a while. Well, after so many hours, the father's obviously very concerned, knocking on the door. Are you okay, Gary? And Gary's response was, I'll be out tomorrow. And he came out the next day, and he just said, my son was whiter than a sheet, and you don't see him like that because he's an outdoorsman. And of course, we have that story repeated over and over and over, every which way but loose. So, great mystery, great witnesses, and we leave so much behind because we don't ask all the right questions. There's tons of information available to us that makes sense, that can help us, but we sometimes get a little lazy with that, or the witnesses like, okay, I've answered enough questions, I don't really feel comfortable talking more about it. So, but as time goes on, more and more information comes to the surface. The question is, how honest are we about it? Are we going for clicks, or are we going for actual information? And I think you know what I'm looking for.
I think that is a good synopsis, what you just said. So, moving on, that you said you could not have said that any better. So thank you. But moving on, you spend a lot of time out in, the environment, the wildlife, woods, mountains, coastal, Piedmont. You are a woods person. You love to be in the forest. You love, everything about it. You also have a buffet of wealth, for lack of better words, of knowledge. It's just abundant. What do you think the average person confuses as aggression when it comes to Bigfoot or Sasquatch, when it is just probably a defense mechanism or is just a natural behavior? What do you think that we confuse as aggression?
Oh my goodness. Just the idea of seeing one is not something that we are conditioned to visually, or perhaps the potential body odors that may go with it, or perhaps the speed of movement can be intimidating. Plus, if it's nervous, it's probably going to be swaying, and it's going to be using tactics to put distance between you and it. And also the vocalizations can be very, very gruff. We're talking about something huge in many cases. Even a teenager, 8 or 9 years old, if that's the case, and coordinating with some of this, you know how teenagers are. They're not all the same size. They don't all grow at the same speed. If that character applies to them, which I believe it may well do, then we've got some giant individuals that are 7 or 8 or 9 years old. So they're nervous and intimidated. Okay. They don't have experience, but it seems to me as though curiosity is their shortcoming, and that's what allows us to have some of the experiences we have. And we're presuming they're great big adult mature males, but they're not necessarily. And the way they speak, those voices vary in sound. Okay, you can have a wonderful woman's voice, or you can have a very, very amazing male voice, but you can also have a that type of stuff. And if it gets real low and the bass is really low, that's intimidating, but that might just be the way they sound. Now, if they're stressed and they want you dead, I think we would be, because they seem to be quite accurate in the way they'll throw things. Rarely do you hear of somebody being hit, but every once in a while somebody gets hit. I read in Rob's book, Raincoat Sasquatch, about a guard who was hit by a rock that knocked him out. Okay. Yeah. One of the men that I interviewed with, did a podcast with, and I forget where exactly, I believe it was Canada, but I may not be correct on that. I'd have to double check. He would, a log, a big branch was thrown at him, which he literally caught, but the throw and the weight of the object knocked him down, and he easily could have been hurt. I had a friend of mine in the past in Montana on his property. He was tossed. He was on a four-wheeler, and this thing tossed him. He thinks it was a individual that came from out west that had problems with fires, and he was very close to the spring or water source. Okay. He was in a vulnerable position. He broke his ankle, and it did not attack. It made its, it wasn't aggressive except for the initial reaction. Now, could they hurt us? Sure, very easily. Do they all know their own strength and control it? I don't know that. Teenagers having fun, bang on the gas barrel and bang on the side of the house. And they could break our windows very easily. They could bust the doors very easily. We can do that. So with their immense power, speed, and strength, they could do all kinds of horrible things to us. But yet it's interesting, isn't it, how many people survive all these incidences? But yet we have other people telling us, beware, you need a weapon every second because they're going to eat you. Well, I've got a lot of friends that have had them on their property for a long time, and they haven't been eaten. And my network is full of people that are doing things maybe not perfect all the time. And if they were such an aggressive species, it sure seems to me as though there'd be a lot more problems than what there are. Yes, in the outback, certain localities, there seems to be places where people come up missing, get hurt, tents get ripped up. They're ripping up tents and killing dogs on a regular basis throughout the range. They don't like yappy dogs that give away their location. That according to reports, and again, this is an unverified species. So if I act as though they're real, forgive me, but that's my experience. They are. And other people are going to have similar experiences before they reach the level that I've been at, but I've been at this since I was 10. So I have 50 years plus experience. Plus, I'm looking at it from angles that other people probably are not, because my curiosity far exceeds the average person. That's why I do this. Plus, I want visuals. I want to see them. So when I draw them, I'm much more accurate at it. And I haven't been drawing for almost 2 years, and now it's time to get back at it. So that's on the list.
When it comes to coexisting, if you have them on your property, what have you found works best?
I'm going to have you repeat that because I didn't quite hear it all. What about the property?
So when you have people that have them on their property, what have you found is the best course of action to peacefully coexist with them?
Respect. You don't have to give them food. If you want to give them trinkets and fun things, go for it. And it sounds silly to say, I'm going to take a picture now. If you want to be in it, go ahead and be in it. It sounds silly to say, please don't hurt my dog. It sounds silly to say, okay, please don't open the gates. That just sounds silly. Yet people do these things and report changes in behavior from them. Okay? I can't verify anything with this except that repeatedly people agree this is helpful. When people have them on their property, more often than not, they don't even know they're there. More often than not, they're not interested in sharing with us, but you get curious youngsters and sometimes that leads to interactions. I have a friend that has amazing things happen on her property. She's not interested in sharing any of it with most people because the last thing she wants is to have people she doesn't know come onto the property with weapons or worse and invade and try to acquire evidence. And of course, that is the problem we have with a lot of situations. Not all researchers are kind and respectful either. And so that's another thing that comes up. How do they read us? Do they read us through our behavior? How did they know that I had a burn problem and had scar tissue and had lost some of my epidermis, and I ended up with a burdock on the trading block? I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know, and that's another reason I do this. I want to know. I want to know why all these crazy people say they saw a Sasquatch when they obviously couldn't have, because there isn't such a thing. Plip, there is such a thing. That's why they see it. We know that. Not everybody does, and it's really understandable to understand why people don't believe they're real. But we have 25,000 black bear in Wisconsin. How many have I seen? 5. And I'm in the woods some. Okay. I have not been in the woods as much as I'd like to be lately, the last several years, but I'll be, as I retire now and start working part-time and start doing more of the things that I'm good at, and that's part of that's being in the woods doing photography, I'm anticipating my wildlife observations will go up significantly.
Dan, what has been your favorite experience in your journey? What's one thing that jumps out in your mind that has been the most amazing experience you had out in the field?
Probably hanging out with Shane and Randy Harrington down in the 400 in the Ozarks of Missouri, simply because they are documenting legit situations with real individuals that they get repeated observations of, either through tracks or other things, digging holes, throwing rocks, picking up rocks. They found a rock on a log. I didn't find much of anything because I was documenting what they were finding. Plus, I haven't put in the field time they have. They're amazing. And so they are a great example of what people can do. And I've tried to emulate that a little bit with the private property that I worked with, and I had some amazing results. Something was picking things up and moving it around, and I didn't get to see who's doing it. But I have been able to rule out raccoons, bears, people, and birds. So what does that leave? I have other friends that have had, for example, my friend Angelique went on a hike one night and she came back to her vehicle and there were 2 white rocks placed on the fender of her Jeep. That night she spent in the Jeep and the Jeep was moved and wiggled back and forth. And she, of course, being vulnerable, took off, and most people would. And she got fingerprints on the window. Okay. When I was in Georgia, I spent a night alone there, and I found 2 oak leaves of 2 different species symmetrically placed on my water cooler. And interestingly enough, one of the trees I couldn't find. So the wind didn't blow that there. Somebody put that there. There wasn't anybody around. That night, I got the lid of my Yukon slammed. And so I was really happy about that. And I spent most of the night waiting to see, come on, guys, I want to see you look in the window. Nobody did that I could see. Now, did they sneak around behind me and look in the window behind me? Probably. Were there tracks? No. Was it track material, substrate? No, not really. So, you got to be at the right place at the right time. And I think if more people spent more time in tents alone, out in the middle of nowhere, you're going to really increase your chances. Now, that takes that takes some nerve to do that, but that's what needs to be done for more observations, I think. So far, in all the tracks and travel that I've had, I've never had one cross the road in front of me that I could see, but I did have something cross the road behind me that I was able to see with a mirror once, about 5 years ago here in Wisconsin. And I've kind of labeled it down to it was either a Sasquatch or a horse. And I don't believe it was a horse because there weren't any fenced in areas, but because I didn't see it, I don't know. But whatever it was big and dark and literally went across the window so that it covered the mirror. And so it would have literally blacked out the windows in the back of my vehicle. So those are some.
Well, I know of 3 incidents, one including myself, where items were left. And, I had a friend, Matt, he doesn't, mind me saying his name. He had fern leaves designed in a certain pattern laid down for him to find. I had a snake skin left out when I went in my area after a hurricane to see if they were okay. It wasn't there when I started the trail. I didn't go 15, 20 yards up the trail past that point, come back. Well, I was watching every step I was making. I was in the swamp. It was after, a hurricane. I just wanted to see what happened to him, and come back. And I wasn't wearing my snake boots. So I was watching every place my feet would land. I would look, then look again, then look again, then I would put my foot down because, everyone knows swamps covered in copperheads, moccasins, rattlesnakes. And I wasn't equipped to go in that day, but, me and my friend Richard went in because we wanted to know what happened to them. We knew they were there. We had experiences. And when I was coming back, we had split up. He went down a logger trail, and I kind of went down a smaller, like a forest cut, because we had both of that going on there. And I didn't go up 10, 15 yards from the point. And I'd sent you the video where I caught it on the video, and it's in the brush, and it just kind of turns and looks at me like, what are you doing? Never knew I had it for years. I mean, I sat on it. And there was a snake skin left in the trail where I'd walked just a few moments, and it wasn't there. Everything was wet around it. This was dry. It was just left laying on the grass, not in the grass, on the grass. And there was another incident where it just happened. My husband and his friend Lynn had a blue bandana left. Now they're in the middle of the forest up on a peak, valley going this way, valley going that way, dry leaves all over the ground. They maybe went 100 yards out of the camp just to see what was going on. And we always kind of walk the area in daylight before, the night hits, just to get an idea of our surroundings. And this has been their 3rd, 4th, 5th time out there in a blue bandana. Now, these are 2 prior law enforcement officers trained to observe their surroundings, and it doesn't give us any more credibility. I understand that, and I don't say that, but you develop observation skills just like, any other industry. A truck driver develops keen driving skills. It just comes with the job. And you would have seen a bright blue bandana there. When they returned, it was, within feet of the campfire, within feet of it, just laying fresh on a pile of leaves. So there's a lot of incidents like that happen, and you wonder, are they, if it had been a person tracking across those leaves like that, we make all kinds of noise. But what had come up that hill and left that bandana made no noise, none. All you hear is a few leaves kind of moving around on the recording, like something was going up around, into the back of the truck and was going through things. Now that's amazing behavior. Did we see what there? No, we didn't. Got vocals and screamed at the same night. That's an amazing experience.
Well, that's it. They're so quiet, and that seems to be a repetitive situation, where they're gifting or they're trading or they're leaving things I have a friend of mine who repeatedly had ping pong balls, tennis balls, golf balls left in the trail, and they would trade them. She would take balls and put them in certain places in the woods. She'd come back a week later. Here they'd be 20 feet up in a tree. You know, she's had her tennis shoes taken. A friend of mine had a walking stick taken in New York State at a certain place, and just because of the fact he loved that walking stick, he went back there a year later, and it was placed right back where he had lost it, where it was taken before. So I've had a couple of things. What's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I've had a few things rearranged and moved, or gifted, and not so much when I'm in the field, but Bryn has an interesting situation with a muskrat skull, and basically she'll find it up on a branch. She'll take it and put it down in the swamp tussock, and then she'll come walking through after she's done with the hike, and it'll be placed back up on the branch. And this is something that repeats over and over and over and over. There's just wonderful thing, as you say, as you develop these incidences. It's interesting because you develop these details that you look for and watch for. Most people would never miss. So what do we have happening right under our nose on a regular basis if we have them on the property or we're in their area? I think it's real interesting. On the last night that I stayed in Ohio along a river at a campground, all my tinder that I had put up at because I was going to do a fire and then I changed my mind. The next morning when I left, all these little designs were made out of the tinder. Now, was that squirrels? Were that birds? Or was that some juveniles? I wasn't there to see it, but it certainly is intriguing, and it repeatedly happens to a lot of people. And of course, you get all kinds of emotional reactions to that. That's ridiculous. Yeah, it had to be them. Well, it's probably somewhere in between, and if they do exist, you'd think juveniles would be playing with all kinds of things. So who knows what they're doing with structures and branches and weaving and all these things. And I'm always interested in the relationships with other animals. For example, I like critters, so I would be looking for baby critters to make friends with. Over time, that baby critter is going to grow up. And it's not going to take too long before that fawn is a doe carrying more fawns. Well, what if they're making friends with them just like our Laplander friends in Finland with caribou or reindeer? I've got reports of big black men being seen out in the middle of a herd of elk. I've got reports of a Sasquatch running with a wolf. I've got a report of a woman who's about to kill a coyote, and all of a sudden there's a whistle from the woods, and that coyote's head goes up, turns around, and zoom, he's trotting toward the whistle maker. Who's the whistle maker? Especially on a property that's got Sasquatch tracks. That's interesting. And it goes on and on and on endlessly. And when people don't know about all these things, but they describe almost exactly the same thing, that's congruent information that Cliff Brackman loves to talk about, where you can pick up more information on the inside that has a chance to be accurate truth, which is fun.
Well, Dan, we're going to do a part 2 to this, but I'm going to let you get back to your family before they hunt me down and shoot me for stealing you a little while.
They're hunters, but they're nice people.
Well, I better give you back. And I do thank you for speaking with us today at the Not So Perfect Bigfoot show. And I look forward to the part 2 on this.
All right. Me too. Thank you so much, Vic.